is that when people saw like, oh, Will Smith can be an actor, it's like people understood I could get in with this hip hop thing, but it also allows me to build these other avenues and brands that actually become quite viable and powerful.
I mean, when you think about all of them, you know, and they're almost all of the same generation, right? When you think about Latifah, when you think about Ice Cube, Ice-T, Will Smith, you know, Most comes along because a lot of folks knew of Most before he was Most. You know, he was Dante, you know, doing Cosby Mysteries. All right, you know, so he had already been committed to, you know, so when you see him in 16 Blocks, it's like, you know, that wasn't something that was brand new. Right? If you see Busta Rhymes in Finding Forrester, right, and part of it is that, you know, hip hop was always such a visual platform. Right, both from the lyrical standpoint, but clearly when they had the chance to actually produce music videos. You mentioned Cube. You know, Cube's first directorial gig was directing a video for Color Me Bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we take some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys have anything you want to ask us?
Since you are all about asking what her favorite track is, I'm kind of curious as to what your favorite track is.
Pete Rock and CL Smooth, they reminisce over you.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I am still here like, please talk more, tell more stories for us. And I am part of the first generation of hip hop in Brazil. Like I grew up exactly like you were saying when hip hop was a block thing. And listen hip hop was to watch a car pass by with rap music and a loud sound. And my question for you guys is how to keep in love with hip hop and to fight for hip hop even with all this misogyny, sexism, as you have been doing. How, I am 33 years old now, and I know it's a new generation, but I think hip hop has so much to give to young folks nowadays, and it's not explored as it should be. How to keep in love with hip hop and how to show hip hop to the new generation that are coming. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that actually really helped me to stay engaged was to travel and to see how hip hop moves globally. So at one of my most disillusioned moments with hip hop, because you know you go through these kind of grown up life changes that sort of make you realize like, okay, first it was like, how can I be a feminist in independent hip hop? Like around 2000, 2001, I'm a new mother, you know, and I have to make a real decision about how much of this I'm actually going to allow my child to be exposed to. And, you know, the commercialism of the music makes it difficult, but traveling, like going to Cuba for the first time, actually, and seeing how hip-hop moved in Alamar was so similar to how I had experienced it in the South Bronx, and understanding that the narrative we have for hip-hop in the United States is one thing, but how it is actually functions as a form of resistance in non-US context is actually quite powerful. So that was really important for me. Secondly, I just, for me, giving up on hip hop, even with all the misogyny, because I experienced hip hop as a culture, in some ways meant writing off the redemptive power of young men of color. And I felt as my job as a feminist was to make sure that I understood that feminism isn't just about bringing about changes, empowering changes for women. It's really about bettering humanity, because feminism makes the world a better place. There are ways that hip hop taught me to look at the ways that masculinity is particularly oppressive to men. And the formations of their own identity. What does it mean to not be allowed a wide range of expression, not be allowed vulnerability, to be tied to these tropes, both privately and publicly, of hypermasculinity? Like, that's just a very heavy burden. So I always say that hip hop made me a better feminist, and I believe that it did. But it was also just kind of digging my heels in on those more difficult moments, and then having to redefine my connection and purpose to it.
Hello. I have a question. It's kind of off topic, but so based off the elevation of sexual exploitation in derogatory terms in current rap music, do you think that it could have been prevented if, like, early hip hop female artists did not take advantage of their sexual freedoms in music?
No. So here's the interesting thing, right? At this point, I think that if we did a chart for misogyny in hip hop and we lined it up and we did it by years, this era of the new millennium era would probably register as perhaps the most misogynist, right? It's also the era that has the least amount of female, commercial female MCs. So I think that there was nothing wrong with, there was really nothing wrong with rappers who were, female rappers who were sexually explicit. There was certainly a critique to be made of them, as there is to be made of all rappers, but they existed alongside. I mean, you had Salt and Pepper, you had MC Lyte, you had Queen Latifah, you had The Brat, you had Foxy, you had Kim. You had a wide range of female voices that all make up the mix. Are you guys listening to Jasmine Sullivan's? Right? So like the brilliance of like Jasmine Sullivan, right, is that they're all of these different black female voices that are contributing to a discourse of what black womanhood is. That's what that moment was like in hip hop. To me, what you see right now is the more flagrant misogyny is that you just took away the voices. You took away all the counterexamples and then kind of complain like, and then put the burden of representation on one or two. And quite frankly, I mean, I love Nicki as when her bars are tight, they are bars. I mean, they are some serious bars. But Nicki as solely an MC, I'm not convinced about that. She really does sort of live also in this world as a mega pop star. And there's no critique of that, but to have her carry the mantle for black women in hip hop is a lot.
I super agree. No. Hi, I just first want to say thank you. I super love you, Joan Morgan. And so much so that I snatched my 16-year-old daughter out of school today and we drove here from Atlanta so we could see you.
Thank you.
And I love what you bring, the critical thinking that you bring to hip hop. I want to thank you for the segment that I caught about you talking about the curation, like what your son brings. I have a 25-year-old son, too, who does that for me. Mm-hmm. And I've been in the music industry for about over 2 decades now. So it's interesting to see the differences. And so what you just healed for me is the conversation around how it grew up as a lifestyle for us, a culture for us, and how it's literally just a genre for them. So I walk in the house the other day and I'm like, truffle butter, really? You're like, we all going there with music, with lyrics and stuff now, and the kids are like, get over it. It's just a passing thing for us. But I guess because I lived hip hop so much, like I lived in the lyrics and the words, when I hear stuff like that, I'm freaking out because I don't want my kids to be living that kind of stuff. So you just helped me kind of get over that. And my question is, though, in this moment, is there a level of social responsibility, not censorship, given the creative freedom as people want to have it, but is there a social responsibility in terms of how it's delivered to the masses? Because I have young goddaughters, for instance. I think it was 12 when they came and educated me on what watermelon seed was and all this other stuff, and that freaks me out. Is there a social responsibility in terms of how you can say what you want to say, but I respected Luke. I'm a freak I'm a child of Freaknik. And I respected Luke because I had to stay up for BET After Dark in order to get that. And it was something that I wanted, so I did it. But I can get up and go to just traveling here, leaving Atlanta at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, you're inundated with it everywhere you go. So is there a level of social responsibility that we could advocate for so that it's just dished out in a way that there's not so much collateral damage?
So this is the kind of question that always gives me reason for pause, for a couple of reasons. You mentioned Luke, and I wonder, would we have wanted that level of responsibility from Millie Jackson? Would we have wanted that level of responsibility from Dolomite? Red Fox, not the Red Fox that you saw in Sanford and Son, but, Red Fox who did the albums. Would we want that level of responsibility for Jelly Roll Morton and a song like Go Get Me a Pallet, which I'll be quite honest with you, would make Lil Wayne blush if Lil Wayne heard the lyrics to it. The point that you make about being inundated with it, rappers have virtually no control on getting their music played on multinational radio stations. Joe and I have been having this argument for 10 years. Also, we know there are now different platforms, right? So stuff can get loaded up to YouTube and things of that nature. But there's a larger system in place that the rappers themselves largely don't have any control over. In the absence of these other infrastructures, these are just dudes saying stupid in their bedroom that no one else hears. And so while it's important to hold the artists themselves accountable, we also have to hold these structures accountable. And quite honestly, it's easier to complain about irresponsible artists than it actually is to do the kind of organizing that it takes to hold these larger structures accountable.
And so you literally just answered my question, because when I ask about social responsibility, it's really not about the artists. That's why I say let's not censor them. It is about the system and the media outlets that perpetuate the messages. It's like the ratings, the whole GPG, rated R, triple X thing is just out the window. Everything is as is everywhere all day long. And so is there a social responsibility to kind of lead things in the direction that it's appropriate for?
What's really interesting, though, that I think, thank you for your question. I think that one of the things that is interesting to me, particularly as the mother also of a 16-year-old, but also knowing Kathy Cohen's work, who's a political science, who's very invested in how is hip hop actually impacting our youth? And I think what is interesting to me is that by and large today, there are far fewer kids who feel like hip hop informs them in the way that I did when I was a kid. Kids make a decision to not deal with lyrical content that they don't want to deal with all the time. I think that hip hop has fewer fans as young people than, let's say, maybe 10, 15 even years ago. And I think that we often assume that hip hop is impacting young people and not assuming that they're making critical decisions and choices about what they listen to. And that also they have a wide range of options in terms of entertainment. I didn't have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and 100 channels on cable. I had the park. And so what was happening in the park, which was MCs and 2 turntables, was really important to me. But kids today have a lot of different choices, and they don't all invest. They very rarely do they all invest them in hip hop.
Good. Thank the both of you. We're going to close the question and answer session. We want to give Dr. Barker, Anthony Neal, and Joan Morgan a hand for coming out and giving us the time. Now, if you didn't notice, what they were doing was very hip-hop. They were telling stories from the past. This is the basis of hip-hop. They were talking about history, and that's our theme and point here. Now, what we will allow, lunch goes from now until 1. So if you have books that you want them to sign, if you want to come up and just, shake their hands and thank them, you can do that. There are students that are here that will tell you. We have those that are guests. We have a Chick-fil-A on campus. We have a Einstein on campus. There's a Pizza Hut. There's a Subway. They will direct you in the direction of those. So if you have books you want to sign, come up and meet the actual scholars themselves.